Thank you for joining us today for Jennifer Schaus and Associates in our Webinar Wednesday program. We're coming to you live from Washington, D.C. Our webinars are every Wednesday and are provided complimentary. They're recorded and can be downloaded from our website and YouTube channel, which now holds over 300 of our government contracting webinars. In the interest of time, we do not take questions, so if you have questions for our speaker, we will have his information on the last slide of the presentation today. A special thanks to our educational sponsor, the National Veterans Small Business Coalition, for making these webinars possible. The NVSBC is the largest nonprofit trade association for veterans. Please visit their website for more information. And now a little bit about us. We work with U.S. federal government contractors, including product, service, and software firms. Our services range from market analysis reports to contract vehicles and compliance. More information is on our website. We will also be hosting a webinar on government Q4 opportunities on July 8th at 1 p.m. Please register on our website. We also have opportunities for your organization to advertise in our newsletter. We now reach more than 19,700 subscribers, and this includes both contractors and government. Contact us for pricing information with the email shown on your screen. And now to introduce our speaker, David Ferris. Welcome, David. We are glad to have you here with us today, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thanks very much, Colton, and thanks to Jennifer and the whole team for putting these webinars together and kind of providing the insight that you do on a regular basis for all of us. So I appreciate the opportunity to deliver this today, and I think it's worth just having a quick intro on myself and a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. So obviously, as it says, we're going to cover the benefits of an outsourced proposal team, and it might seem that we are being responsive in the topic selection to coronavirus and the pandemic, or that we had some sort of foresight, but we actually selected this topic back in November to deliver because I think it's timely. It was before the pandemic, and it might even be more timely now to discuss and learn a little bit more about outsourcing of proposal teams and really some of the niche capabilities that companies require to do work with the federal government. So a little bit about me. I am a retired Canadian military officer. So today is Canada Day, in fact. So for those of you who may or may not be Canadian on the line, happy Canada Day. I served in the Canadian military as an infantry officer, but actually spent the last few years of my career here in the United States at the Pentagon on an exchange program. And I worked for some of those years, in fact, in the community, the counter-IED community, and dealt with procurement and kind of got my introduction to government contracting on the Canadian side of the border, and then again, working in the Pentagon a little bit down here in the last few years. I retired in 2018 and started my own small business, providing consulting services to other small businesses, both just purely in kind of the private industry and then some government contractors as well. And I joined the LSI team last fall as a Vice President of Business Development. And so I'm approaching this discussion today around outsourcing of a proposal team from a bit of an academic perspective, and then drilling down into some more concrete aspects of the benefits of outsourcing. And I think it's, like I said, it's not only timely now because of the coronavirus, but really in terms, and I'll demonstrate this a little bit as we go on, in terms of where the economy is shifting and how you can maximize the benefits to an organization while minimizing the risk and resources. So we'll jump right in. Colton, next slide, please. So that's what we're going to cover today. Just a short, really take out the title slides, a 5-slide presentation to cover functional expertise and business success, PMP principles, or project management principles, I should say, and then a few other things that are obviously there on the agenda. And rounding it out at the end, I'm going to speak specifically about capabilities, capability development, and the idea of what the ideal customer is for a company like ours, like LSI, because it informs really what we do and our approach to enabling our customers. And I think it'll be a benefit to many of the companies on the line here today, and certainly lots of the folks that Jennifer works with, because we all kind of come at this from the same perspective. So next slide, please. And straight into it, please, Colton. Thanks. So functional expertise. So I always like to start with a reference. And in this case, it's a reference from Harvard Business Review article in 2016, which dug into a 75-year study on why businesses last, what gives a business longevity in its industry, and the study spanned 75 or 80 years of research into businesses that came and went in their industries. And there were 4 key themes that were pulled out of this research project, and then articulated very well in that article in the Harvard Business Review in March of 2016. I think it's called either Why Startups Last or words to that effect. But the 4 elements, if you will, of success for any business, the first thing that a business has to do is implement some sort of management hierarchy, and I'm not going to speak to that today. The second thing is bring on functional experts, which I will cover shortly. The third is implementing a forecasting and planning capability. And the fourth one is the ability to articulate and inculcate the culture of the organization into the people. So today I'm only going to touch on functional expertise and forecasting and planning as it applies to this idea of outsourcing. But I think it's really important to talk about functional experts, because most small, medium-sized businesses, there are folks on the team that wear more than one hat. You have maybe a couple of founders who came together around an idea, and they may have expertise in software development. They might be engineers, or any of a number of trades or jobs. But as you bootstrap a startup or work your way through small to medium-sized enterprises, you end up having people that fill more than one role. And in order to have that success, in order to have that longevity in your industry, the research shows that functional expertise is critical to actually being able to maintain not just a couple of years of success, but in some cases, decades of success, particularly as you scale a company up. So I guess it does kind of relate to that idea of a management hierarchy. But using the software developer kind of model, a company that I've worked with in the past, there were 5 developers that came together and formed the company. And the guy that was best with numbers, he did the books, he did the accounting, and there was someone on the team who basically took over social media and marketing. And for each of those founders, those weren't their areas of expertise, but as they grew, they recognized when the appropriate time was to bring on those functional experts. And so when we talk about outsourcing of functional expertise, we're kind of at this point in the economy right now, and it's been going on really for several years, but you can Google the growth rate of the freelance economy in the United States, and there's several articles that'll pop up. And so I just kind of took the average of those references and said that it's approximately three times. So the outsource or freelance economy is growing at 3 times the rate of the U.S. economy. And I think that's interesting and something that for small and medium-sized businesses, when you're thinking of all of those niche capabilities required to put together a winning proposal, outsourcing some of those capabilities becomes critical. And particularly when you see that 3 times the jobs are being created in that freelance economy. So your opportunity to find people with the right expertise is growing every year. Upwork, which used to be Elance, has grown incredibly over the last several years. And I know I've worked with several small businesses, both on my own as a consultant and since joining LSI, who regularly use Upwork and other services to find that functional expertise and at a very reasonable cost. So the key here, though, that I just want to kind of put out there as we have this discussion is that the evidence would suggest that longevity in your industry, and again, this research, the study spanned a multitude of industries. The research would suggest that implementing a hierarchy with that functional expertise is a critical part of a company's success. So next slide, please. Okay, so kind of going down one level, I've covered really that overarching academic view, if you will, of why outsourcing would be beneficial. And now I'm going to look at it kind of from a bit of a resource perspective within a company aligned with industry best practices. So for those of you who are project managers, certified or otherwise, throwing money at a problem is no foreign concept to any of us. And so PMI captures that as crashing. And the term is regularly used, but we often use it incorrectly when we say we're just busy with something. But the term crashing actually means something specific, where you have an identified activity over time with an objective or a goal, and the project needs to shorten that time to complete the task. So it's not just increasing your workload or being busy. It's actually trying to shorten the amount of time it takes to complete a task. And that can be done with the addition of resources externally, or the reworking, if you will, of your work plan internal to the project. So there's this idea of full-time employees being used to crash on a proposal or any piece of work as detrimental. We often talk about it as paying for some work twice, where if you're using a full-time employee in small or medium-sized business, and in some cases, I'll just caveat this with, there are companies obviously that have large proposal teams. They have lots of functional expertise, but that is a resource-intensive endeavor. And I would offer that where we find our sweet spot, and as a company, and probably many of the companies on the line here today, is in that small, medium-sized range where you've got lots of functional experts, but in specific capabilities, and there are gaps in what you can do. So I'll just caveat that. So, but using your full-time employees, you can often pay for things twice, because you end up pulling someone away from already existing work. You pull those resources from projects. And that individual may or may not have the actual functional expertise required to fill that capability gap on the spectrum of activities to complete the proposal. And so what that does is you're paying for it twice, because you reduce what's going on an already existing project, and you now are adding to the cost, if you will, against the proposal without necessarily delivering the expertise. So on both of those projects, the ongoing one and the new proposal that you're pulling people towards, you're increasing the risk. And so what we do, we often look at this in a risk matrix from low to high probability and low to high consequence. And anytime we need to shift resources internally, and this is, many businesses do this, the military does it, you gotta make a use case. You gotta analyze the risk to moving those resources from one project to another, and looking at it in kind of that 4-block square of low probability to high probability, low consequence, high consequence. You can determine the risk involved, but you can often see that crashing with full-time employees, it increases the risk on one of those two activities that's going on. Now, this isn't to say that crashing isn't necessary, because it is. It's a vital part of project management. If any of you have successfully implemented all of your projects on time with no change to the original schedule and under budget, or at least on target, I tip my hat to you. Some projects come out that way, but the majority don't. It shifts one way or the other quite often. So, but we often say planning, success is planned for and resourced appropriately. So it is possible, because crashing is so vital and it happens so often, it is actually possible to plan for it. And so we encourage our clients and our partners to plan for the ability to crash. And I know that for small businesses, keeping a reserve of cash is often very difficult. And I'll touch on that as we talk through strategic partnerships later on. But it's important to at least understand the gaps in your own capabilities around proposal development, proposal writing, proposal management, so that you know at the appropriate time what kind of resources you need to bring to bear in order to fill those capability gaps. And so crashing in the kind of truest project management sense is perfect for an outsourced proposal team, because if you can plan for it accordingly, and again, we'll talk about that shortly, if you can plan for it appropriately, you can bring the right group of people together at the right point in time to deliver a winning proposal. And really, that's obviously what we're talking about. And so outsourcing those capabilities is an integral part of that. So next slide, please. Resource leveling, another project management theme, if you will. And again, I'll reference the Harvard Business Review article about planning and forecasting capabilities. And this is something that we often take for granted. Companies talk about their business plan, they talk about their strategic growth plan, but being able to resource a plan is what actually is the key to success. So having a viable plan hinges on some sort of planning and forecasting capability resident in the organization. And this can take the form of a couple of members of the team. It's often led by either the chief executive officer or the president, and maybe someone who runs the operational team and your financial team. But bringing together the right people to create the plan is part of being able to level resources over time. So what we look at when we look at our businesses, what we're doing is solving problems in a linear model, right? So we're solving problems over time, either internally for our customers, for our clients, but we always envision things across a specific period of time, and then we resource that period of time, and from those resources we pull out lines of operation or effort and tasks and activities and milestones and objectives. And so the ability to level resources across that plan is important, especially for small and medium-sized businesses that have potentially only one or two different business areas that they work in. They may not have sufficient personnel to meet all of the demands that are being placed on the organization. And so being able to outsource subject matter expertise to support proposal teams, that helps you fill those gaps. Now, the previous slide, I talked about crashing. And when we're applying the idea of resource leveling, that's taking the known potential crashing that's going to occur and forecasting it and building the resource plan for that, so that over time, and again, this kind of relates to the horizons of your business, not so much maybe your in-year expenses, but certainly in future years, your years 1 to 2, 1 to 3, maybe 3 to 5, being able to forecast how to bring on outsourced expertise actually allows you to use your internal resources more judiciously. Quite often, we plan for using full-time employees, and I mean, we're guilty of this as well, where we assume we're going to be able to use internal resources to complete a project or an activity or task. And the problem with that is when anything, if any unforeseen circumstance arises, and I will use coronavirus as this example right now, you end up in a resource-constrained environment internally. So now, even us, we provide a lot of these services to clients when we've needed to put together our own work potentially for a proposal. We've actually outsourced even some of these capabilities ourselves, not because we don't have the capability resident, but we've already allocated those resources, those personnel somewhere else. So outsourcing a proposal team, when you start to drill down into how you build your plan, what your forecast looks like over the next few years, whether it's in support of your own activities or your customers, you can actually focus and determine over time where the most likely periods are that you'll have to bring on subject matter expertise from outside your organization. And that allows you to actually, like the slide says, level those resources over time against your different business areas. Next slide, please. So this one I thought, I talk about strategic partners, and I have for quite some time, both, again, running my own small business and then working for LSI. And when I was in the Pentagon, I worked on a cross-functional team, developing plans and strategy in the plans shop, if you will, in the Pentagon. And the make a movie methodology, it's the first time I heard it was when I came down to the Pentagon. The idea that you bring a group of people together for purpose at the right time, resource them accordingly, deliver the movie, and then everybody just disperses. I thought it's a brilliant kind of model or description of how to bring together a team at the right period, at the right time. So this make a movie methodology, and if you kind of pull on that thread and look at the defense industry or even the government contracting industry writ large, lots of companies are now doing this make a movie methodology where they're engaging with strategic partners, and it's not just a contractor subcontractor relationship. They're identifying companies who have capabilities to complement their own, and it fills those gaps. And if you looked at all of the activities over a spectrum that are needed by a business to put together a winning proposal, and you did either yourself did an assessment of your own capabilities or had an external party come in and assess your capabilities, you would most likely, as a small or medium-sized businesses, you would most likely find a few gaps in there, particularly as your delivery capabilities grow, but you may not have the expertise to put the winning proposals together. So I talk about strategic partners because they are tied to strategic growth plans. So if a company is comfortable where it is, you've achieved a revenue, an annual revenue that you are comfortable with, and your hope is to maintain your position in the market, then your strategic growth plan is probably more in line with just capturing sufficient new business to counteract any lost business over time. But if you have an aggressive or even a conservative growth plan to outpace the growth of the industry, then you need to be looking at how you resource that strategic growth plan. And internal resources are where obviously everybody looks, and you can either, if you need cash or an influx of funds, there's debt and equity ratios that companies can look at to finance future growth opportunities. But equally as important is this idea of finding strategic partners to hitch your wagon to complement your own capabilities and align yourselves in strategic growth. So we look at this in terms of understanding this, your own capabilities across that spectrum of activities, working with a partner over a specific period of time in an area of targeted growth. So you don't want to necessarily have to partner with someone for all of your growth, but as I'm sure all of you know, growing your business into a specific market or industry, you can target partners that align with you not only in terms of what their growth strategy is, but their capabilities would complement yours. And there's an important element here as well, that it allows you to begin to off-ramp remote or outsourced teams. And so while I know we're talking about the benefits of an outsourced proposal team, this is sort of my segue into my final slide, is that what you don't want to do is create a dependency in your organization on an outsourced team. These are resources that you need to use at a specific period of time and for purpose. So it's this make a movie methodology, right? Where if you are dependent on the outsourced team consistently, then maybe you need to consider how you can grow your own capabilities, or you can form more of a partnership with that other company or whatever to help you achieve your growth targets. So I know we're kind of coming to the close here, and it's perfect timing to go into my final slide, please. So capability development. So I finished that last slide talking about the make a movie methodology and off-ramping proposal teams. So I'm going to look at this slide, and even though I've got a few points, few bullets there, what I want to talk about is look at this from the reverse perspective of what is the perfect client for a company like ours. And for me, my ideal client is a company that needs me right now, needs my services, which obviously, whether it's business development or proposals or any of those niche capabilities. But my goal is always to grow that company to the point where they no longer need my services. That's the perfect client. They have a strategic growth plan. They've got a time horizon of whether it's 1, 3, 5 years. And over time, they recognize that they have the gaps in their capabilities that can be augmented by my services or the services of one of my own strategic partners. We can resource them with a remote team, an outsourced team to support whatever they need. And then from a client perspective or customer perspective, what you want to start doing is overlapping the outsourced team, the remote teams with your own company, and you want to grow your capabilities into those gaps. So it's insufficient to have a growth strategy, identify the gaps in your capabilities, and just kind of move out from there into the future. As a company, as an organization, those small and medium-sized businesses, and even some large businesses, you want to acquire in some way that capability internal to your organization over time. So it's kind of key here that outsourced proposal teams and remote teams serve a purpose for a very specific period of time, and allow companies to develop, to achieve their growth strategy and develop their internal capabilities at the scale that they need. So if you want to do this as a company, as a business, it's possible to create, and some businesses do, they try to create a 10-year business plan. That's a long way away, it seems sometimes. But it's possible to do that and identify all of those gaps, because in some cases you want to bring on a new technology or service a different part of the industry. So what I would encourage you to do is to look at this type of proposal, outsourcing of proposal writing and proposal work as part of a strategic growth plan, both from a revenue perspective as well as an internal capabilities perspective. And so with that, I encourage anyone who's interested, reach out to me. I love academic debate. So please, if you have a counterpoint or you want to have a discussion about this, I'd love to connect with any of you. Or if you want to ask more questions about any of the research or the references, I can provide that. And I'm available for questions at your convenience. So thanks very much, Golden.
Thank you, David, for a great presentation and sharing your time with us. And thank you to everyone who joined us. I want to remind everyone that we will be hosting a webinar on government quarter 4 opportunities on July 8th at 1 p.m. And you can register on our website. The recording for this webinar will be on our website and YouTube channel within the next 24 hours. Please join us this Friday as we cover each part of the FAR, and join us next Wednesday for more hot topics in federal contracting.